Let's talk for a minute about something that is quite concerning for parents, even coaches, spouses, anyone that's connected to a rider that's had a fall, had an injury, had an accident that is sometimes major, sometimes minor, and they're now stuck in a fear cycle. And one of the hardest things to do as a support crew is, how do you hold your own fear? How do you hold your own anxieties, your own nerves? How do you react to? How do you support? How do you feel that you can contribute when your own nerves and your own anxiousness and your own sense of foreboding is starting to creep up, and you want to help the person you're with, and yet you're having trouble controlling your own fear, let alone letting them get through and work through the stuff they have to get through. It's one of the hardest things as a support person to be in that space of being helpful, being supportive, being the person they can lean on, and allowing them to process their own fears and own doubts, and not throw a big blanket of your concerns and your biases and the way you filtered the accident or the injury itself. It's exactly like we talk about with grieving. There's no right way to grieve for something. There's no wrong way to grieve for something. There's no process that goes in the exact same timelines. Someone can come out of an accident and be full of bravado and just go forth and not even think about it for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years even. Sometimes even longer, never have a hiccup from it. And other people will come and they'll be gripped with fear right from the start. How do you hold yourself though in that situation where you have witnessed it and couldn't do anything about it? Where you have been the person that's encouraged them, or been the person that's actually been the Debbie Downer in the relationship, and how do you then let them still fulfill their dreams and still have concerns about what they want to do? It's a never-ending cycle of how do we support the person that we love, that we want to protect, and that we want to let them do what they can do. And this is one of the greatest things about learning how to accept what we can control. We can, as a support person, we can't control every moment, and yet we witness so many of the moments, and that is where it's really hard, because at least as a rider you feel you get a say in certain situations. Certain situations may take on a role that you can't control, but at least you feel you have some sense of saying in what's going to happen next. As a support person, you get very little of that. You feel like a complete bystander in those situations, that situation where you are helpless and hoping that things can turn out better. So what do we do in those situations? How do we support? One of the biggest things to come to terms with is, can I accept the risk in my own terms and be the support person that I need to be? Because if I can't accept that, then at some point I've actually got to walk away from the situation. So some people can be at an event all the time and be that support person no matter what the dangers, no matter what the seriousness of everything that's happening around them. And some people just aren't able to cope with that situation. So that means that you might be a support person that is at home. And that's fine. If the person still feels encouraged and still feels that you are there for them, just you can't expose yourself to certain situations. And this is about having real conversations about real feelings, real emotions, because it is all about how we handle our emotions, how we handle acceptance of certain things. There's no way of hiding that. And if we're real about things, often that can be a real pressure release. I feel this because this makes me feel this way. I can cope with these situations. As a rider, sometimes the hardest thing to deal with is when one of your support crew is almost having a nervous breakdown about the fact that you are about to take what they consider to be a horrible risk. However, the more as a rider that you've been exposed to those sort of risks, it doesn't really seem a risk to you because you've been exposed to it, you've been in training, you've made the calculations that the risk-reward scenario is working in your favor. And of course, it's lovely to have an outside perspective on certain situations, an outside person to bounce a ball off and say, hey, what do you think of that? But if that person is clouded in an emotional storm about whether the risk in its entirety is even worth it in the first place, then the rider is often not going to go to that person in those times when they have a little self-doubt and get the answer that they feel is unbiased and will help them decipher a problem in the real time. So can you accept what's happening around you? Can you be open-minded? Can you also put your own emotions aside as they go through their own emotions? Can you feel that when they're having a fear injury that you don't have to bombard them and put them in a safety bubble? Can you just be the support person they need in situations where they don't feel they're even taking very much risk? If you don't understand the risk and the reward scenario, then the best thing you can do is talk about it, but don't talk about it in a competition moment. Talk about it in the days, weeks, months leading up to competitions. Talk about it in a training sense. Talk about it in times where the pressure isn't on, so you can both evaluate the data that you need to understand, not just the emotions that are happening in that moment. Having clear and open conversations and a sense that you can talk about these emotions, that you can grieve for times that have gone past and how these situations are now different, how you have fears that sometimes seem unbearable to burden anyone with, and yet you still want to be there. Having open and clear conversations around what you're both feeling, how you accept the risks, how you've mitigated, how you've trained, how you've understood what's required in these moments. These things let us become a better support person and a more open support person, because then even if you decide that you can only give of yourself in certain situations, at least in those situations you are being true to the purpose, to the drive, to the goal that's in mind. If you're the person that weighs everything down and makes everyone second guess everything on the way through, then are you the right person to be in that place in the first place? There's a lot of emotions, a lot of pressures that are happening on a competition day. Does it need to be you as well? Are you trying to take up the oxygen of someone who's trying to put themselves out there and do their very best in that moment? Even if there's no safety issues involved, someone who's putting themselves out there to the absolute limit, they are taking risks. And that is an emotional thing anyway. Plus you're adding a 600 kilo horse into that equation. There'll always be risks. There'll always be something that's unforeseen that's going to happen. Can you understand what is within your control and what is without your control? And can you accept those two things? Having an open dialogue helps. But don't try and cram the conversation. Don't try and push the conversation. Let it evolve. Circle back. Take your time with it. Don't try and have that conversation for the very first time in the practice arena when you're feeling overwhelmed and unsure. Learning to deal with your own emotions and learning to deal with what is possible and what your role is within any situation, especially as a very caring, interested bystander. Because at the end of the day, in those situations, you are a bystander. But you can be a loved, cherished, and honored bystander if you want to step into that role. I hope this little video helps starting to have an open conversation with what is on your mind and also how you accept the risks and the dangers involved in our sport. And it is a really tough thing being on the sidelines. It seems like the rider and the horse are taking all the risks, but at least they get a say in how they're taking them. Sometimes as the bystander, you are the one that's left to pick up the pieces. And sometimes emotionally that seems the hardest job in the world. But if you have open conversations, understand where you're coming from, understand the trainings involved, understand the risks that are being taken, then things can work out. And a beautiful team can be created, no matter how much the pressure feels like it's on. Hope you found this video helpful. Please like and subscribe. Take care. The most important person to be kind to is yourself. Take care.